Hello, welcome to another round of Alicia Reviews Books, where I, Alicia, am a mental health therapist and I love reading. So each month we tackle different self-help, mental health related books. I get to tell you what I liked and disliked about it, and then you get to decide if it is a good fit for you. I'm really passionate about accessible quality mental health care, and so even though there's a lot of options out there, that can be kind of daunting, and they're all not the best fits for us. So if you have suggestions on books that you'd like me to tackle, drop that below because I love adding to my read list. But this month, we are chatting about the book called Fair Play. It is about a game-changing solution for when you have too much to do and more life to live by Eve Rodsky. Fun fact, this is also, I think, on Netflix or Hulu. It's like made into a documentary. It was picked up by Reese's Book Club and even her production company. So this is kind of blowing up right now. And I was super excited to read it. I read it for book club. It was my suggestion. And I was excited because there's also these fair play cards, and I have been suggesting these to clients for years. It's a great tool to help figure out household chores, parenting chores. It talks about expectations, just all these fun things, and it's a nice, like, external thing that couples can do. So I've been doing this forever, and then when I learned that there was a book to go along with it, your girl had to read it. So I was jazzed. If you're new here, you know that I kind of start, or I like to go over what I liked, what I didn't like, and that way you can figure out for yourself if it's a good fit for you. I'm start with just an overall rating though. So this one was a tough one to rate. I normally try to give a pretty clear answer and not add so much like confusion to things. But this one I've got a lot of caveats for. So my overall rating for it is a 3 stars. I know, out of 5. I was super bummed by it because I was so excited. Again, I recommend this to so many clients. It talks about the mental load and just women's expectations and all the things that I'm super passionate about. So I was super bummed that I didn't love all of it. All right, so here's some of my caveats. If you're a mother in a straight relationship, then I'll bump it up to a 4 for you. And if you aren't all of those things, not or, like all of those things, then it's a 1 to 3. So it's definitely like made for a specific audience. Nothing wrong with that. My other caveat is I wish this book was split in half because the first half of the book, I'm gonna give 5 stars. Honestly, I loved it. We're gonna go into why I loved it. This was great. The other half of the book, I was a 2 star, and I think I was being generous when I made my outline because now that I've had some time away from the book, I think I'd give it a 1 star. So 5 stars for the first half, 1 to 2 for the rest. General consensus, 4 stars if you are a straight mother, 1 to 3 if you are not both of those things. So take that with whatever it is, and let's chat a little bit more about what the heck this book is. Okay, so this book is about managing the mental load and invisible work that goes into caring for a home and a family. Again, things that I love. I work so much on these topics with clients and friends and family. So your girl was super excited to read this. I did enjoy that this book does discuss how to have these conversations with your partner and work towards a more fair, unintended, fair way of dividing up these tasks in order to deepen relationships, have a stronger sense of self, and even take things off of your plate. All in all, it's really just about how to stop fighting with your husband about chores every day. So, yeah, if you are in that type of dynamic, you might want to keep watching. So, we're going to start with what I liked about the book. There was a lot. Again, I loved the first half of the book. And part of it is because it was super engaging. Literally from the first page, the first story she shared, I was hooked. No joke. My husband and I were sitting in the basement of my aunt and uncle's house. He was studying for a test. I was doing my reading for book club, and I was giggling so hard. I had to like stop it because I know he's trying to like study for a really important test, and I'm over here just like cackling about how relatable these stories are that she's sharing. I was able to see myself in some of these stories. I was able to see my clients in some of these stories. So it was very engaging and very relatable, which I think is really hard for a lot of self-help books to do. Sometimes they can just be a little out of touch. So this one I thought did get it, and I really loved it. I also loved some of the language that she uses because I'm a sucker for language. I'm very intentional with the language that I use. Language work is something that I do with a lot of my clients, and it's just so important because it really impacts how we think and how we feel, and just it impacts everything, guys. But there's some language that she used, which I started to incorporate, is something called the she fault parent. So I'm going to let you try to figure out what you think that means. And if you haven't figured it out, it means default. So think about how many families are two parents, the mom and the dad, they're both working full time. They've got a kid or a couple of kiddos. They've got their own families and hobbies and things going on. And a kiddo gets sick. Who's expected to take time off of work? Who gets the phone call or email? Who is expected to make a doctor's appointment? Now, if well, the answer is the woman, the mom, and if those things are agreed upon ahead of time in your relationship, there's no problem with that. But what's the issue is a lot of these things aren't discussed, and it's the unspoken expectation that it gets put on the female partner that leads to a lot of this mental load and invisible work. So, yeah, it was a little spicy at times, which I enjoyed. I like that it gave definitions even. So just like the things that I said, mental load, invisible work, emotional labor, there's things like that that I think we hear on social media or even on TV shows sometimes, but sometimes it can be kind of a buzzword and we don't really know what that means. So she did a great job of explaining what the heck those things are. Because again, having the language is important because then we can communicate those things with our partner without attacking them. We like that. Um, this one, I talk a lot about this next point on my social media a lot, and it gets a lot of hate from the men, and surprisingly, it gets a lot of hate from women. So when we think about the mental load or chores or navigating those things, how many of you have heard or have had your partner say, just tell me what I can do? Can you just make me a list? How can I help? And I know that it is coming from really good intentions from the male partner, but it is so not a helpful thing to do. And when I talk about this on social media, I get a lot of hate because people are like, I just asked my wife for a list and she doesn't complain. Or I have women who are like, this just works for my family. Okay, okay, okay. We're not trying to generalize for everyone, but for a lot of people, these types of comments are adding to the mental load, basically forcing the female partner to be kind of like the household manager when they are also juggling their own job and doing everything else. And also, like, just open your eyes. Like, what do you mean? Just tell me what to do. Look in the kitchen. Like, do your eyeballs work? Because if not, then I'm more concerned that we need to go to an eye doctor if you don't know to do the dishes when the dishes are full. So I sometimes am a little spicy with how I address that on social media. She does it in a much more gentle, compassionate way, which is really helpful because we don't want to attack our partners and have this be an argument. So it kind of like helps their, like where they came from and some of the myths that they've internalized while also emphasizing how it's adding to that exhaustion to us. If you are new to the podcast or this podcast, I don't know if it's a podcast, whatever this is, you're going to learn the word systemic. If you are an old time viewer, you're going to learn or you're going to remember that I love about systems and things being systemic. This book is super systemic. So a lot of times we think A happens, then B happens, or this person is to blame for this. And it's just very like linear. But my brain, being an LMFT, is I think in systems and relationships and context and all these different puzzle pieces. And that's what this book does. It talks about how workplaces are not set up for women, especially moms, how schools and doctors' appointments get put on them, how the social planning gets put on them, how it's not really like the fault, like we're not blaming the male partner. It's really society that has created this system. So even when both parents are working, a lot of times like women still take on more of the responsibility. We talked about what invisible work was already. So it's similar to mental load, but it's really about the tasks that go unseen or unrecognized by our partner. Also, sometimes ourselves, because brains sometimes minimize things. But these things still take time and energy to do. So I liked that even though they're related terms, she was able to tease them apart. And again, it's important work to have that language so we can be able to communicate those to our partner. Okay. Oh my gosh, so many terms. I'm just like looking at my notes that I did and so much language that she gave. So we talked about mental load. There's something called second shift. So, this is for the families that have two working parents. So you go to your day job and then when you come home, you're basically doing all the stuff at home and then the other partner kind of gets like, "Oh, I had a long day at work. I'm gonna go play some games. I'm gonna go relax." And like you are again the she-fault parent. Emotional labor, we talked about that. So it describes how they are similar, but also how they're very different and just how they all can impact us and why we are exhausted all the time. Okay, the other thing that I loved is she talks about research and the sad, sad numbers of our reality. I'm a data nerd, and so I liked seeing numbers, and then I was also just like got really angry at my husband. And again, we don't even have kids, and I was like mad at him for the male species for like a good 2 days because I was like, I hate this statistic. But there's a stat that says that men cut their contribution to the house by 5 hours after the kids are born. So even if you and your partner are pretty equal pre-kids. You guys say, hey, we believe in, equality and our fair division of labor and all this stuff, and they're pulling their weight. The second the child comes, on average, men cut their contributions by 5 hours. That blew my mind. Because I was like, you can't even weed out the bad ones, right? Because it's like, no, you're doing the thing. They're saying that they have the same values. And then they still, even the good ones, still 5 hours. I'm not even joking when I said I was a little mad at my husband for, like I said, 2 days. Okay, well, I won't go on my TED Talk too much on that. But yes, this is data driven. There's research in here. So the numbers back it up. And it's just like infuriating, but also very validating that if you are tired, if you are angry, if you're resentful, no duh. Like the numbers ain't lying. Alrighty. Anyway, moving on. The other thing that I talk about on my social media a lot that gets a lot of spice from men in particular is the idea of men being the helper in the family and how that word implies that it's the woman's job to like be in charge and then the man's job is just to help and assist like and how they get praised for like doing the bare minimum like oh I took my kid to the park and everyone's like oh my God he's such a good dad and mom's over here just like literally keeping the house from being burned down it's just ugh. Or how like we have to remind them to do it and so it's like still putting the responsibility on us. Yeah, I was like, we do not use the word helper in our household. Like you are the parent, you are the contributor, you are the husband, you are the spouse. It's not a helping situation. Okay, you can see that I got a little. This is why I liked the first half of the book, right? Like it enraged me, but also like gave me language and things to do with my clients. So like it's really good stuff in the first half. One of my favorite takeaways from the book was that she says to make the invisible visible. I'm going to pause. I'm going to say that again. Make the invisible visible. So many, and I noticed that I also get caught in this trap, and so I've been forcing myself to do this too. So many of us do things when our partners aren't around, or when they go to sleep, or when they're doing their relaxing, and we are doing things, and then we expect them to like know that we're doing things, but they've never actually like seen things get done. Like, have any of you seen the skits where like the husband's like, "Wow, we've never run out of toilet paper or toothpaste ever. Like, isn't that so cool?" And the wife's like, "Yeah, because I'm doing it." She's not saying every week, "Hey, I'm making a list and I'm making sure we're adding, toilet paper and toothpaste." She just does it, and it often goes unnoticed. And so the things that I like in my own house, I do like the cat litter and replenishing the cat's water. I do a lot of that stuff after my husband goes to bed. And so I started to do that while he's awake. And like that's made a huge difference. So I was like, does he even know that I do this? No, because he's asleep. And like I'm getting annoyed, but like it's not really his fault. So make the invisible visible. We're gonna get into the nuance of that too, but basically just like stop saving everything for when they aren't there because then they can't really see it anyway. Okay. I also really liked that there's a system. So the book kind of describes what the system is with the cards and how it's really set up for both partners to win. That was one of the main themes that she kept saying throughout the book was this wasn't meant for like a person to win or to blame or attack the other person. It's set up for both partners to win. It was less stuff falling through the cracks, less resentments, less nagging, less fighting with each other, feeling more confident, being able to trust each other more, so many things. So I really liked the values and the intentions for this system. So then the second half of the book really just talks about how to use the cards. So this is where I was like, I kind of wish it was just like an instruction manual that like came along with this and just got to dive more into like my feminine rage, but I get it. She's a businesswoman. So you as the main theme also is that these cards are not meant to be 50-50. So I really like that these cards really were meant to start discussions about what do we like to do, what's important to us, what do we expect, what are our values, and it is discussed. This is not a one-time 5-minute conversation. There's like 100 different cards here. So it's a discussion where you both get to talk, you both get to share, and I really liked it. There's also another term that I really liked, shocker, called CPE, conception, planning, execution. And this was a game changer for me too, because I think a lot of times when we talk about task, the partners help with the execution of things. So it's like, yeah, I'll make dinner or I can do the dishes. But we need the conception, which is the like recognizing that something needs to happen, and the planning is what is needed to be done in order for it to happen. And then we do the task, right? So if someone says, well, just do the dishes, but then they find out that there's no laundry soap or like the water's not working, that gets put on you then to like do the C and the P, and they're just working on the E. So I really liked that if you take a card, you're kind of supposed to take more of it. More on this later, though. I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself, so it's a little confusing. So don't worry, we're going to learn a little bit more about that. Okay, the other thing that I really liked, and this is the therapist in me, is that it talks about the consequences of doing it all. I'm going to repeat that again for the folks who need to hear it. There are consequences for trying to do it all. There's physical stress on our bodies. There's health risk of not sleeping enough. There's buildup of resentment in relationships. There's wanting a divorce. Like, it is not fun. It's not sustainable. So she goes in a really good amount of talking about that. Um, It's really relatable. I'm going to kind of sum up the rest because I know these can be a little long. So the other things that I really liked is it talked about identity and how there's a loss of identity, especially when you become a wife or a mom, and how part of this is about kind of like sparking your purpose and your own identities. So we loved that. Got to learn about some toxic messages. You know, your girl loves that. I really liked, again, I think I said this already, but it's important to keep saying, and she kept saying it, so I know it's important. This is not about scorekeeping. We are not here to say, well, I did the dishes one day, so you do the dishes. Or I have one card, so you need one card. This is a discussion about what feels fair. Equal isn't always fair, and fair isn't always equal. I really liked that language because we all have different things that drain us. We all have different experiences growing up. We all have things that are important to us for different ways. And so this allows for some individualization instead of having like a cookie cutter method. This allows you to do what's best for you and your family. I really like that. And then there were some, and this is like a like and a dislike, which is why it's in the middle. Um, there's some ideas of how to start this conversation with your partner and kind of how to phrase things so they don't get defensive, because that's not a helpful conversation for anyone. So overall, that's most of what the first half of the book was. That's why I really liked it. It got spicy. It aligns with a lot of my values, and it's things that I saw in a lot of my clients. So we can get into what I didn't really love about it. All right, like I said, this book was made for a very specific person, and that's okay. Not every book has to be for everyone. This book was clearly from the female's point of view and really focused on motherhood. Even though not all the cards focus on motherhood, and she tries to make a claim that, like, if you don't have kids, you can still benefit from it. And I would agree with that. About 40 of the cards are kid focused, and a lot of the examples are kid focused, and so it definitely leans that way. I liked most of the book and the examples, and I do think it was really relatable. However, I did notice some privilege undertones that she tries to address, but also kind of misses, and that's not necessarily like her fault. It's just something to be aware of if you maybe don't have privilege in every area, then this might like you might get annoyed at some of the things she says, and that's okay. All right, the other thing that I said was that the second half of the book, which is why I rated it about a one or a two, is it's mainly just an instruction manual for the cards or the game. You might love that, but since I've already like know how to do the game and like I've been recommending the game for people, for me it was kind of redundant. And I also felt like she just kept saying the same things over and over again. So it was like trying to make an instruction manual into a book. And so it just wasn't like as well written. It wasn't as engaging. I skimmed a lot more. Um, it just wasn't as helpful. So the first half of the book, great. Second half of the book, you can skim it or just get the cards. So the other thing, kind of going back, I know I'm kind of all over the place here. Stick with me. Sorry, it's the end of the day for me. Um, I also really wish that this book was for both partners. So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. Again, I'm a systemic thinker. And this book was clearly written for women, which is fine. But then it like talks about ways to label or categorize your partner. But then it clearly says like, don't tell your partner this though. Like it calls them like a big baby or things like that. And that's not really helpful. Like I'm not gonna, that's if my husband read that, like that would lead to an argument, right? And so instead, I'd rather the book give me language that was more helpful and I could say, hey, I wonder if like this is the category that we're in. Because we see like John Gottman doing that and other researchers like still can categorize people, but they're not like, don't tell your husband this. Like that just seemed really weird. And most of the book was about having a conversation with them and giving language to talk to them. So I wish it was more focused on having like both partners read this book together But like I said, the first half was just like pure feminine rage, and so I think most men would either get super defensive or just say that we're overreacting because we're super emotional. All right, clearly Alicia's spicy. That's okay. All right, if you're sticking with me, we're going to go a little bit more into those like CPE things, right? And so when we talk about the cards and we divide them up, we're talking about how things get figured out, how the planning goes, and the execution. And with the execution comes what's called a minimum standard of care. I like the concept. So basically, it means what's like the minimum that we can agree on that like other people would also say this is a fair standard to have. The intention is for us to be able to compromise and understand each other and kind of like help each other out a little bit. What I didn't love was that there was no real explanation on what to do if it was a standstill or there's very different values. So, like in the few examples she shared, of course, they found a compromise super easily, right? But I've worked with couples who both have really valid points of view. They're just very different. And so, what do we do with that? Of course, she didn't really give anything on how to deal with that. It was just like, we just figure it out. And it wasn't really helpful because I know a lot of times like that's a major point of contention and stress for a lot of couples, or it forces one standards onto someone else. And again, that's where then like resentment can build up, or we feel like we're not being listened to, and those deeper issues can be there. And so I would have liked that handled a little bit more delicately. She also talks about this term called like reasonable harm. And what that means was like for the minimum standards of care, like is it like to kind of help lower the person with the higher standard, kind of like knock them down a peg, be like, what's like the potential harm that could be done here? But again, this is very subjective. Like, the harm, like for me, like the harm that I often come to is like, well, my cat's gonna, he's an a-hole and he's gonna get into things. Whereas like other people might not see that as a huge deal. And so that's gonna be a different value difference, a different belief system. One isn't right or wrong, they're just very different, right? And so how do we compromise there? There was really no answer there. I already mentioned that the second part was redundant. She kept explaining the cards. We get it. The cards are great. I love it. Back to the CPE, so there's the conception, the planning, the execution. She was very clear that one person is to take on all three aspects of the card or the task. And I understand her reasoning. So her intention is if one person takes on all three, there's less likely to be like messy things, right? It's like something's not going to fall through the cracks because I'm in charge of all the things. And I think in like an ideal world, this is where something like that privilege kind of comes in. I get it. I don't think that's truly helpful or realistic for most families, though. And I think some of the things have to be shared. Um, and she thinks that things should never be shared. She even says like not to even ask your partner for help if like let's say you were in charge of like the C, P, and E on one task and you couldn't do one of those pieces. She's like, don't ask your husband for help or don't ask your wife for help. Like call your mom instead. Again, like kind of privilegey, right? Like, and her example was even like a glue stick. Like if you're in charge of helping your kiddo with a school project and you forgot to buy the glue, don't tell your husband to pick up the glue. Like tell your mom to pick up glue. And I'm just like, what? No, I'm going to call my partner and ask them to help it out. So I understand her intention, but the execution I think is a little out of touch for a lot of folks. Oh, I really had some thoughts about this CPE stuff. So then she goes on and saying that by asking your partner to take on the task that you agree to do, right? Like I'm in charge of all three of the C, P, and E, and if I ask you for help, this is what leads men to have affairs and divorce. I wish you could see my notes because I literally just write like what in like big bold exclamation point question mark like repeatedly like what the F? No! Like it's just come on. So anyway, that was not my favorite thing. Take that with a grain of salt. The other thing that I think wasn't addressed in the book and maybe it wasn't in its space for the book, which is totally fair, but something that either future books should address or could address is that time isn't energy. She kept talking about time myths and toxic time messages, which I love. Like, we do need awareness for those things. But time isn't the same as energy. There's other factors like mental health, physical health conditions, tasks to recharge, tasks that prevent burnout. And it isn't really as simple as saying 10 minutes is 10 minutes or this task is this task. Like, the things that I do maybe take different time because of my mental health compared to my husband. So, energy, I think, has to be incorporated in these conversations and not as like an excuse because I think sometimes people can like vilify or exploit some of those things, but just being real about it. Like, I'm not gonna, like, I have depression. And so there's gonna be weeks where I'm gonna have less spoons and I'm gonna need my partner to step up and take on some more of those tasks. Even though I might have more free time, my energy is not the same. And vice versa. My partner currently is in a really busy season with the start of school, so they don't have a lot of spoons, so I take on more things. So it isn't really just simple about time. I think energy needs to be a factor in there as well. Alrighty. Oh, she did her best, really trying to be like, we're not scorekeeping, guys. We're not scorekeeping. And then there was a part where like there's a frequently asked questions section, and someone's like, no, really, just like share a number. Like, what's the expected, thing for like a good, healthy relationship? And again, there's 100 cards, mind you. Homegirl said 21 cards. So we're still kind of patting men for doing the bare minimum. Like, I understand the intention is like, hey, you were probably doing all 100 cards. And so the fact that he took on 21 means like you now have more time and energy and you guys are happy and all these things. And I know, again, I know that it's not meant to be 50-50 because the cards all take different time and energy and all those factors. So logically, I get it. But like, 21 cards? That's not even 25%. Like, we couldn't even done 25 cards. Like, come on. They can do some things. Come on now. All right. Anyway, overall, who would I recommend this for? Like I said earlier, if you're a mom in a relationship with a partner and you are motivated to help, but not really knowing where to start, that's where I think this book would thrive for. So I'm going to reiterate this because it's a little confusing. If you are a mom in a relationship, again, this is like a female-oriented book. If your partner or spouse acknowledges that there's an issue with the division of labor, with the mental load, and they want to help and they don't really know where to start, I think this book and or these cards are wonderful. It really requires both partners to be motivated because it doesn't really address what to do if the other partner doesn't want to change. If they're dismissive of your thoughts and feelings, it doesn't really give conversations on what to do if your partner doesn't want to step up. And so you really need like both partners ready, even though the language, like I wouldn't suggest this for the male partner. Your male partner like needs to be on board, especially for the cards. I honestly recommend the cards, however, to pretty much anyone. They're a fun way to externalize things. It takes the blame away from things. It gives good conversation starters. Even the minimum standards of care and the CPE things are described in here, as well as hobbies and self-care time. So if you're not a reader and somehow you still like listen to all this, thank you. Really, just get the cards though. I think it's a good spot for foundation, but I think for a lot of couples, you're going to need something a little bit deeper. So, overall, that's my thoughts on this book. I hope if you do read it, let me know what your thoughts are, if I'm way off, if we agree. And if you have ideas for future books, let me know because I don't think I know what my next book is. So, let me know. Thank you for watching. Take care, and I hope you read some good books.